I've shown this sign before in other videos. It's on the edge of a parking lot in the Shenandoah National Park, and it tells people they are standing on the Appalachian Trail. It shows a couple, obviously long-distance hikers because they are carrying heavy packs. Notice how cheerful and clean and fresh-looking they are, and how they gaze at the natural world around them with reverent, wide-eyed wonder. I took this picture because it reminded me of all the hikers I had seen who looked nothing like this. I'm talking about the ones who looked like they were worn out, demoralized, listless, and highly annoyed. And that's what we're going to talk about. How we can stay motivated if we plan to hike hundreds of miles on the Appalachian Trail, and things that could happen that might hurt our morale. I cannot pretend to offer tips that will make us as eternally happy as the couple on this sign, but what I can do is describe some of the scenarios on the AT that can make us less than happy hikers. I will offer these with the idea that if we talk about them first, they might not be such unpleasant surprises if they happen to us in reality. That won't make them any less unpleasant necessarily, but if we know in advance they are possible, they might not hit us as hard. In some cases, we might be able to prepare for them a little, and usually whatever the problem is, it will be temporary. I believe these things are important to remember because a big psychological element is involved. It's easy for us to tell ourselves things are worse than they really are. This is particularly true when we experience a tough situation we have never experienced before. On the other hand, if we have a tough situation we've experienced once or twice before, we can put the latest event in context. We will be in a better position if, having experienced the tough problem before, we gave some thought to how best to deal with it if it happens again. One example of this is a guy I once saw who was in his 20s, was 100% healthy, and was very strong. He was on a section hike and had just finished his first ever 17-mile day on the AT. He said he was exhausted and he might not even walk 5 miles the next day. What really happened, I think, is he was so strong he rarely, if ever, got tired before. And when he did get tired, it shocked him in a way he didn't immediately understand, and his morale went down the drain. From a strictly physical standpoint, this guy was capable of hiking 20 miles that next day. All he needed was a decent night's sleep. It is sometimes true that fatigue over a period of many days can slowly gnaw away at our morale. This can manifest itself when we start to worry about what's on the trail in front of us. Most wooden shelters along the AT contain a trail journal, which is a notebook. Hikers can write anything they like in the journal. I met one thru hiker who had walked more than 700 miles and wrote at length in a journal how she was dreading the next hill 2,000 feet tall. Instead of going up the hill, she went into town and took a day off. I think that was smart. She later sent me a photo showing she finished the entire AT. I met another thru hiker after we both had just finished walking the roller coaster. This is an area in Virginia about 12 miles long that goes up and down repeatedly. I have read it requires climbing a total of a little under 2,700 feet. The thru hiker told me it was the roughest section of the AT he had been on, bar none. When he said that, I really didn't believe that he was telling me the roller coaster was the worst place on the AT. Instead, I think what he was really telling me is that was the worst day he had on the AT. The roller coaster has a reputation for being a rough place, and I'm sure many thru hikers hear all about it long before they get to it. Probably it is rougher than average, but I have seen other places that I thought were a lot worse. At least on the roller coaster, my pulse slowed down when I was going downhill. I think he was just worn out that day and having a bad day, and on the AT we will have good days and we will have bad days. If we do have a bad day, if we are worn out and have trouble staying focused, wherever we are on the AT has the potential of turning into our own private hell. Compare all this to a thru hiker I once met who looked over 70 years old. When I met him, he had walked more than 800 miles on the AT. He was carrying a big pack that weighed 45 pounds, maybe more. I could tell from looking at him that he was working very hard with every step. There aren't too many things that can help an AT hiker more than blind determination. Maybe he had something to prove. If we absolutely feel like we have something to prove, it can help us. Before I went to the AT the first time, I knew the hills would be rough. When I later hiked on those hills, I found they were worse than I had thought. The hills have the potential to shock anyone who has not given them much thought in advance, or anyone who hasn't been on hills like that before. This might be one reason why the southernmost end of the AT is famous for would-be thru-hikers who end their hike in its opening days. As I have said before, previous outdoor experience is valuable on the AT. This is true in terms of not only skills learned, but also true regarding our attitude. The AT is not the best place to learn how to deal with 3 days of straight rain. If we previously endured heavy rain elsewhere in the outdoors and made any necessary changes to our gear to help us endure rain, our morale will be in better shape if bad rain strikes on the AT. If our attitude goes down the drain, maybe, like the woman facing the 2,000-foot hill, the smart thing to do would be to take a day off. Many thru-hikers take a lot of days off, and if it helps them keep hiking, I'd say they did the right thing. Injuries are another story, and sometimes the correct thing to do is stop until we heal. A bad injury might mean the hiker would have to leave the trail. On most of my AT hikes, I was alone. An eternally cheerful and patient hiking partner would be a great thing if in fact such a partner might exist. A hiking partner is at least somebody to talk to, even if one of us is complaining. I have found hiking by myself to be sort of boring. I just plodded along watching the trail so I wouldn't fall down, unendingly, day after day. When I would find myself bored, I tried to work up a sense of excitement about stopping for the night. Usually it worked. If it didn't, I fell back on my old standby, cussing to myself. Even so, there was sort of a grim satisfaction in the fact that at least I was hiking. If I was in a foul mood, I'd say hello to any hikers I met in the evening and let it go at that, retreating to my tent. If for no other reason than if I was grumpy, it meant I was tired and the best thing would be to get some rest. There is one exception to that, if I could stay at a commercial campground. Because twice I did that and I got adopted. And by that, I mean other campers with cars and/or RVs would see my pack and small tent and ask me questions, and the next thing you know, they would invite me over and give me beer and hamburgers. Needless to say, I found this to be quite a morale booster. On the Appalachian Trail, we rely heavily on our gear. It is vital that that gear work effectively. Again, I believe the ideal scenario is to test that gear under hard conditions before we get to the AT. If we have already proved elsewhere that our gear will do the job in bad conditions, we can expect it will work on the AT also. I also have offered many tips in my other videos with the hope they will help keep us hiking and help keep us happier. If I have never said this before, I never went to the AT because I thought it would be all fun. I knew there would be challenges and I wanted to see if I could meet them. The AT is not always a convenient place. Sometimes the trail turns to mud, sometimes the trail floods, sometimes the shelters are full, sometimes they are full of thieving mice. The privies usually stink, a few of them don't even have 4 walls. I hear that in some areas the trail doesn't even have a lot of the white blazes that reassure us that we're on the AT. My experience suggests the best way to cope with such things is to accept that they exist. Some people who live near the trail are called trail angels, and they do a lot for thru-hikers. Sometimes they carry food to shelters or leave soft drinks in a cooler along the trail near a road. This is called trail magic. Some trail angels give thru-hikers rides to stores and so forth and help them find places to stay in towns. Generally speaking, this kind of generosity is reserved for thru-hikers. Being a section hiker, I respected that. Because my hikes involve limited time, all I wanted to do was keep moving. Even so, more than once a trail angel visiting a shelter would insist that I take some of the food they brought. Many thru-hikers spend quite a bit of time in towns along the trail, and that certainly can help their morale. They can rest, watch movies, eat pizza, and generally have a fun time. Even though I wanted to keep going and going as a section hiker, I broke that rule when I arrived at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. I took a day off at Harper's Ferry and turned into a tourist. The town has a significant place in the history of the American Civil War, and I wanted to see all the sights and read every bronze plaque. I caught a nice vacation buzz in Harper's Ferry, and it made the rest of that section hike a lot easier. Before we wrap this up, I should emphasize my goal here is to help the healthy hiker keep moving. This does not mean we should ignore basic safety. If we have a significant injury, if we are seriously ill, if our gear falls apart, or if we cannot take another day of it, probably the thing to do is to leave the trail as quickly as practical. There is no shame if this happens. It only means we have a reason to return later and try again. And once again, we are done. If you have not yet subscribed, it would be much appreciated if you do. And as always, thanks for watching.